I think my problem is slightly different to the things that we've been seeing before. And the reason for this problem lies somewhere in the nature of the project I'm just about to start. And the thing is, actually, if that competition from yesterday, whose ideas are least developed, was still extended to today, I think this is the winner. But the key question is, how does somebody who sits on a boundary between innovation studies, STS, business community, has external collaborators, actually bring all these people together and kind of create some kind of a outcome that everybody can sort of rally behind, as it were. So the title is about seeing progress or seeing development, which is trying to visualize the kinds of narratives, the kind of research narratives that I'm trying to propose. So as I say, I'm working in between different, very, very different sort of communities, as it were, of scholarship, of research, and indeed of professional practice. So I'm based in STIS, or STIS, right? I'm the I bit, kind of looking at innovation in the UK and Scottish space sector. So trying to not just understand how this small emerging sector is being developed and is coming together under intense political interest and industry interest. You probably know that space sector, and particularly satellite sector, is one of the 8 great technologies, and there's lots of sort of support behind the development of this industries. So that's where the kind of the context comes from. But there's actually a specific project that I work with. And that's perhaps the most challenging bit. There is a new business incubator being developed in Edinburgh that's going to support small startup companies in the space sector, or indeed support researchers to take their research from the academic sphere, as it were, into the business waters. And that kind of makes it even more complex. So it's not just the STIS and innovation studies, but I'm also talking to business leaders, I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm talking to scientists who don't know they're entrepreneurs yet, who obviously have a completely different idea about things. And I've got these external partners, the most important of which is the UK Astronomical Technology Centre, which is the body, the government-sponsored body that actually leads this research, part of the Science and Technology Facilities Council that leads the development of this incubator. And there's other sort of knowledge brokerage organizations in this area who are kind of interested, and if they want to talk to me, they always say like, well, what are you going to give us back? And then I always have to promise something, or I'll actually go and produce some kind of outcomes for this research. So whose language should I speak? Because these people speak very, very different languages. They construct their knowledge in very different ways. Or should I use all of them? And that will probably be very, very messy. And if if I dilute my methodology that much, it's probably not going to lead anywhere. So I try to stick to my guns, and that's kind of this rough approach of sort of what we call biographies of innovation. There's biography of an artifact, which Neil and Robin were working on, and it's kind of trying to study sort of in depth, kind of following the trail of the actual artifacts. In my case, kind of products and this kind of early innovation process. So it's very kind of in-depth micro level, going in, talking to companies who have already launched and developed products in Scottish space sector, and trying to see sort of how does that fit with the kind of the wider context. I'm thinking whether I'm going to use some kind of network approach, like knowledge networks, or maybe something along the lines of systems of innovations. And even though they're kind of fixed point, they're on it's not really a longitudinal study. I only got 3 years to do it after all. So I'll just speak about all of these kind of longer term projects, kind of biographies from today. So looking sort of back and sort of trying to construct some kind of a narrative about how products were developed in this context. So that's kind of by definition, right? Talking to people about the past, it's going to be very, very qualitative. We'll try to quantify bits where we can, but it will be overall very, very qualitative. So that's a big problem, because in many of these other research partners and in the business community, it's kind of nice to have simple visual messages, or simple messages that people can look at and say, well, actually this makes sense. You've got kind of the idea right, when do validation of data, or just when you actually try to work with you. So here comes the little twist. So I thought, well, actually, what's the best way to say something? By the way, I'm a physicist by background, so graphs is something that I like a lot. And this is a very, very famous graph. It's just an example. It doesn't really have much to do with, well, has maybe a little bit to do with my research, but it's a very, very famous graph that went completely revolutionized the field of understanding innovation. Kind of the little dots that kind of don't move out of this little sort of sieve, then kind of start to kind of move all around, and we got this open innovation model, and it's kind of it's a visual tool to say that's what it looks like, or that's what in some part looks like, and obviously this is not an accurate representation of anything really. It's a conceptual tool. It's an abstract way of telling a story about what innovation is like. And in that sort of sense, I want to tell a story about what this kind of micro-level innovation is like. So I come up with something that is, well, this is very tentative. So as I say, very underdeveloped. But it's this kind of time-wise biographical sort of progress. I mean, and first of all, I'm aware that all these terms that I'm going to use from now on are completely, they're all, very contentious, so we can have long discussions about that if you like. But the key point is that you plot something that has a timeline at the bottom, and that I have kind of a measure of kind of how the knowledge that is sort of inbuilt in this product is actually developed over time. And again, doing even for a sort of small kind of product or some very specialist product, plotting something like this would be very, very difficult, because people have very different ideas about where these big knowledge changes came from. So how how did the actual artifact, the actual product got changed? So I've got these little loops, and I'll try to have like 5 or 6 or somewhere up to 10 max for any individual of my little biographies, and those are kind of little innovation cycles. And obviously, this is not going to be just a flat line. It's just going to kind of change and shift. And these innovation cycles are going to be what is actually going to move the line as much. As I say, this is very, very underdeveloped. But it's the kinds of visual tools that I'm planning to sort of use to just make sure that everybody's on board and kind of that we have kind of a rallying point. So if you look into the kind of the cycle, it's kind of it's based on people who know it's stuff like Nonaka's work and others on innovation and kind of different types of knowledge and integration and different kind of stages in an innovation cycle. But if you look in, it's a little bit more detailed. All these things have some kind of a meaning, and you're kind of wondering, well, how is this actually going to look like? And at the moment, it's really not pretty. It's just like a little template, but it's supposed to look something like this. I hope you see this. It's not really too bright because the graphs are quite small. So you start off somewhere, this is kind of the conceptual idea, you have to kind of pick some kind of a time scale. And then, mind you, all these straight lines, I mean, they're basically all little small cycles. It's just that, you have to pick the big ones, and you have to kind of find some kind of a consensus on when these actually big shifts happened. And then you go up to some point where you hit on some sort of a problem, a new idea, or some kind of a need for shift of knowledge. And then you kind of make a loop like that, or you kind of loop around, and you kind of get from this kind of, if we look quickly at the previous graph, you look at going, kind of go, oh, we're defining what's going on, and then we're kind of trying to get sort of this more knowledge in, and at all this time, the complexity is increasing, and you're looking at, how the problem is all building up a problem, and then you're trying to put it get rid of the extra stuff, and then kind of integrate it into your artifact. Again, this is all contentious, and we can all talk about that, but it's a rough idea. But the interesting thing, hopefully, that's also going to happen, it's kind of a pleasant side effect of plotting these things, is that we might have, hopefully, some kinds of trends. You can see that one is, the complexity or the knowledge embedded in the artifact is kind of rising up there, and it's falling in this case. And I'm hoping that this could potentially reflect the different kinds of approaches or different kinds of focuses that people that are building new products are actually, different direction they're coming from something that it's a very highly complex scientific project, and then try to find the bits that actually might work as an application somewhere, and you have to kind of get rid of the stuff. And the other way around, when you start with, well, how are we going to cure cancer? And then you go and start realizing, well, actually, it's much more difficult, and we need more and more and more, and kind of the level of difficulty, complexity, the amount of knowledge that the company or the project has to absorb gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and sort of keeps on building. So this is kind of just a rough idea, and I really would welcome any comments and suggestions. But the key challenge, and I guess you have all faced similar challenges before, is how do you translate, as it were, something that to a social scientist or somebody who's kind of keen on things like biographies and trying to understand things in kind of contextual and qualitative way. How do we kind of bring that into some very clear and simple message for the other communities that we need to engage or we want to engage? Okay, I think that's me. Thank you.